So our last speaker of the morning is David Walsh, who joins us from Grail Entropix, which he founded as a current awareness patent information service. And this includes consulting in patent chemistry with a strong emphasis on Markush patent analysis. Before that, he served 11 years as a senior information scientist with Pfizer, which has contributed to giving him over 30 years of experience in patent and chemistry searching.
Thank you very much. Is this working? I hope so. It's amazing that everybody else has stolen my thunder throughout this week. You do a slide presentation and you find that the previous presenters have actually used all of your data. But anyway, I'll continue. I won't hold it against them yet. So this talk is really about use cases. Obviously, we know that the integration of internal and external chemical information is a vital and complex activity for the pharmaceutical industry. And it is the talk that I'm presenting will be about the use cases which have been developing throughout the work that I have done at Pfizer. But to go through some of the original development of these processes, we'd like to say that the cost of integrating internal and external data is expensive. Now let's say it's very expensive. Generating quality, comprehensive external data sets is expensive, and even finding that data to be integrated is expensive in terms of time, of identification of the ability to use that data, and to compare it in internal systems with internal Pfizer-derived compounds. This data needs to be accurate, comprehensive, and contain metadata. And that generally is, this compound is owned by a particular organisation, or there is a bioactivity associated with that compound, which may be qualitative or quantitative. So it's difficult, then why do it? Well, deriving information, knowledge about competitor companies is something which makes the world go round in the pharmaceutical industry. We want to know about the advances made by other companies and exactly how that affects our research efforts. So deriving company information on molecular approaches is a valuable competitor intelligence tool. Determination of the creative processes and medicinal chemistry rules that drive lead optimization is important to assist internal drug discovery processes. Now, somebody once described to me that it's not the company, it's not the high throughput screening, it's not the molecules, it's the analysis of the rules by which we want to make new drugs is the important component. So the medicinal chemistry rules describe the types of molecules that a company might wish to make, but also those additional rules which suggest that one should lay clear of certain chemical types and be aware of metabolism, pharmacokinetics, and toxicity proposals which would say, don't go near there, that's not the right thing to do. So it's the collection of rules in the medicinal chemistry departments which ultimately lead to their success or demise. For other groups, there is the description of prior art, particularly patent attorneys, which would describe whether those molecules deriving from the research effort have been described previously by other companies and what distinguishes them from other prior art molecules. It allows decisions to be made on the narrower case of freedom to operate. Can we work within this chemical space? And it also describes areas of chemical space that is very congested, which may lead to additional problems further along the line which affect the lead optimization of particular target molecules. And of course, we want to be able to model molecules in a comparable way to the way that we do it internally. We want to be able to do molecular modelling, molecular docking procedures. We want to determine comparable physicochemical properties between internal and external molecules. This enables us to compare our research efforts with other companies. So it's important to provide this externally derived molecular set in formats which are capable of being integrated with internally derived molecules. Now, this may mean considerable changes to the molecular environment within the company, but it also needs molecules which can be compared like for like. Now, this was never a case 5 years ago, but with the introduction of chemical text mining approaches, then it is possible that we could get smile strings which could then be allow this integration techniques. But also, it's important to recognise that internal and external molecules are essentially different. It is no good registering external molecules as though they were your own, because then people ask for samples, and that's never a good thing because you can't be done. So I'll make some reference to the Pfizer use case study, which was derived about 3 years ago in 2010. However, a patent analysis group was established up to 2 years before that. And what I can say about the Pfizer use case is that they may have been modified and amended over the time since I have left that group. The requirements were for large collections of molecules, of exemplified molecules from patents, supplemented by data on pharmaceutically relevant exemplified molecules. So bioactivity, ownership, those sort of concepts. And additionally, within this use case environment was the ability to investigate Markush space. So going back 5 years, IBM knocked on the door and said they could do work with us. And we thought, great, we'll do it. This was an early partnership environment whereby we assisted with the IBM development of the chemical text mining rules to identify and improve the quality of information coming from the US EP and WO patents that they were text mining. The then formed a consortium of 9 pharmaceutical companies, probably reduced since then, and they then introduced image-to-structure conversions for patents in the US Patent Office from 2000 onwards. It was vital that Pfizer had ability to own this data so that they can use it as they saw fit. It was not really a feasible process that the data was available on the cloud. They wanted it in close proximity with their own information systems. So this presented a long period of consultancy with IBM, and the data represents molecules which appear in chemistry-related documents, not necessarily pharmaceutical documents, patent documents at all. The downsides of these automated processes was that generation of large numbers of molecules created the possibility of junk to creep into the data stream. A large number of molecules could not be processed, but it was difficult to work out the yields of the molecules and associate those with particular patents. The amount of checking of the process was very time-consuming to find out what the quality of that information was, what was being missed, what was sort of information which was not necessary to know, but was it reaching the right molecules within those patents, or was it just dealing with smaller, less interesting intermediates or starting materials? So, in order to beef up the quality of the production, then we turned to GVK Bio's database, which provided high quality structure data and also bioactivity data. And it's interesting to work out that there is little overlap with the structures in the IBM patent database, which is perhaps disappointing in terms of text mining, but we'll let that pass. So these data sets, whether we owned them, whether we held them in while we still held contracts, was that the downside mentioned there, the little limited coverage of the patent literature, but I would say that that means that it was high quality data from the patent literature, although 10th of the IBM database. So, looking at the collections of data which we originally chose, we then chose to generate cross-disciplinary teams within the Pfizer network, from La Jolla through Groton through to the Sandwich site. It was necessary to generate teams which were cross-functional, cross-country disciplinary teams to indicate whether there were any significant cultural differences between various parts of the Pfizer group. But the types of people that were invited to these cross-disciplinary teams included discovery chemists, medicinal chemists, informatics people, patent practitioners, as they had different perspectives on the type of information that was required or the types of information that would be useful to their work. And they enabled us to extend the variety of use cases, as well as extracting the metadata knowledge of the data source. So it's people who knew what patents were and how they read them, and what sort of information could be retrieved, what sort of information was available at various components of the patents, and gave us a clearer understanding of the tasks available to generate viable and quality data sets. So the next slide would be these cross-disciplinary teams: medicinal chemists, information scientists, patent attorneys and cheminformatics. People who have experience of chemistry and patent databases, have experience in patents, especially people who have extensive knowledge of chemical nomenclature, and people who have experience of the structure and nature of documents. And these people then became the advocates who went back to their silos to assist with the presentation of those knowledge that's been found, and to increase the awareness of these new products and tools within their particular groups. So we go on to use cases. We've finally got there. One of the major important things was to integrate third-party and in-house data sources from chemical patents. And so they wanted chemical structures, text and numeric data, which may include biological data and even clinical data, although that's rare to find in patents. We wanted to incorporate new and delete existing data sources. So we expected that the system would be fluid, that new data sources would appear or supplement or basically replace data sources which then became more unwieldy. So they want to operate within the third-party guidelines of acceptable use of data, which meant that certain types of data was not available to the projects. It would have been the gold standard to use chemical abstracts data, but that became unavailable through various use of data restrictions made upon that system. So the architecture of the system had to be easily updatable, and adaptable according to different types of data which was being presented. And additionally, the concordance between Pfizer patents and bioassay on those compounds was regarded as important. So the integration of Pfizer information with external data was always in the key components of this. Yeah, that's all right. So the use cases then developed into different types of use case which engaged with chemistry landscapes, looking at structure searches, substructure searches and Markush searches around particular chemistry components in the patent literature, and also in the RIF, which is the Pfizer data warehouse, relevant to the TA research units project series, to increase the amount of information available, which may include biological data from the patents. It was to identify potential overlaps of a project's compound against the entire patent landscape, and that included both the exemplified molecules and Markush. So the use cases identified not merely exemplified molecules, but the potential of Markush in that analysis. It was intended to identify and visualize top-ranked patents and molecular feature overlap within those documents. And then additionally, Pfizer has a history of acquiring other companies. It is a considerable undertaking to identify what is a Pfizer patent. Well, maybe that's changed now. So, given a list of Pfizer numbers, it was not absolutely certain which patents they were published in, even in Pfizer patents. So that was another additional component which was regarded as a valuable commodity to be able to text mine associations with Pfizer patent numbers to the relevant patent documents. The next use case is the target chemistry landscape, i.e. not really to do with the initial understanding of a chemistry inquiry, but to identify all those patents associated with a particular biological target, to identify all the patents associated with the intervention of that target, and then to generate a chemical landscape associated with that. So associated with those ideas is the introduction of visualizations of properties and chemical space components to identify and facilitate analysis of competitor activities. So in order to achieve the target chemistry landscape, one needed to identify those patents which had specific target specificity. So patent alerts and patent landscapes associated with the molecule, with the patents which are targeted at particular biological activity. I don't want that one. So in this slide we get that description that, as mentioned in the last presentation, the Markush space is a much larger environment than the exemplified molecules space. We also have the PFEDA, which is the Pfizer registry system, and how that interacts with the data generated from the text mining and curated analysis of GVK. So those types of searches, the chemistry search, the target landscape, patent ranking, and feature analysis, which I will describe later, it was a method by which we would like to identify that there is similarity between substructures, but based upon a connectedness nature of the molecules, so that we could make analysis of exemplified but also Markush molecule systems. Information overload. Right, we've mentioned probably large numbers of different numbers of patents which are produced all around the world every year. There may well be 70,000 chemical patents. How many pharmaceutical patents are there? We do have this problem that a large number of patents from a large number of different patent offices eventually describe the same thing. You have a family of patents and there are equivalents between the patents. Sometimes these equivalents are exact matches of the documents. Sometimes they have variants between them. But one can reduce that 70,000 chemical patent number down to a much more reasonable size if one considers the equivalent nature of patents. So that is an important thing to try and reduce our information overload. But additionally, we'd still like to know which Pfizer patent numbers are found in the WO, the EP and the US. So, you know, there are various things needed to be done in this space. So, concordance between structure IDs and patents and where they are published was regarded as an important use case. Identify the PF number, identify those patents in which they are covered, and allow that output. So these were the types of searches which were used to benchmark the IBM patent database. Exact structure match needed to be completed, but taking account of tautomers and stereoisomers, etc. So the generation of the Pfizer patent to PF number connection was regarded as an important product of this. And there's the work which I spent a lot of my time doing, was the identification of patents on a weekly basis and defining what their biological activities were. It's a work which I still continue with Pfizer in a product called Pfizerpedia Patents, which is a semantic media wiki which lightly indexes the weekly patent collections and then introduces them to rigorous indications, targets, companies, and annotation work, which enables us to then use visualization tools such as Spotfire. We've mentioned Spotfire before, haven't we? Yeah. So that one can do simple analyses based upon time series associated with particular targets and the companies that are actually engaged in those targets. Simple stuff. But also we do more complex feature analysis sets. We also generate collections of structures associated with particular targets and then define the similarity or feature analysis between those particular molecules. So that's the type of applications that we look towards, whether molecules are similar in structure or exactly the same, or how much they differ between particular scaffolds. And then the next task is to basically benchmark the Pfizer data sets with other companies. So how do the properties of our chemical matter relate to the external environment? How can we compare the approaches made by a particular company X and Pfizer? How does the physicochemical properties of these molecules differ? And what sort of things is Pfizer looking at which may be not the intention of other companies? So it gives us a sort of benchmark as to the quality of our approaches, our rules in medicinal chemistry, which I mentioned before. So those types of property landscaping are incredibly important for us to define our position vis-à-vis other companies, whether they are reaching the same levels of confidence in their molecules, and whether they have actually adopted the same chemical rules as Pfizer has. So what became from feature analysis was something which described superatoms, and we've mentioned those before as well, haven't we? Superatoms could be used in relation to generation of particular feature types in certainly in Markush definitions. What it originally started off was a means to highlight why particular molecules actually fitted into Markush strings in patent documents. However, it seemed to have another functional utility, that it could describe similarity and connectedness of similarity in a different way from Tanimoto. So that additionally came out of the project. Okay. So that's the conclusion of my talk here, but I'd like to make some further conclusions relating to the use cases that we adopted. The first one is the choice of partners of the accumulation of external data is determined by cost. It's determined by availability and the ease of integration of data. Second point is that the benefits of integration of internal data and external data has profound effects on drug discovery and the patenting process within pharmaceutical companies. The development of the use cases came after the delivery of the external data, i.e., what do we do with this now? Well, we've generated teams to identify all the possible components of why the information could be used to as many different groups as possible in order to share the cost of the generation of this data. Valuable new workflows were made available and the integration was possible. New ways to analyse both internal compounds and external chemical space possibilities. It did give us a lot of introductions into how to identify new chemical space. Cross-disciplinary teams are vital to inform the process and ensure that the possibilities are communicated across the organisation. Another vital component to improve the communication of patent tools around the company. And the systems need to be adaptable to take account of changes in the data availability, new requirements for the different types of analysis. So different ways in which we want to explore these large data sets are constantly being found, and the systems need to be able to identify that data sets. So with that, thank you very much for listening.